Hey, so again, Seesaw. You're here to learn about Seesaw, and chances are you work with lower elementary students if you're here. Seesaw was purchased for our K-2 students across the district. So teachers have a platform to help push out content, to assign work, to share announcements with families. However, just because we purchased it K-2 does not mean that other grade levels are not using it. So there are some schools across the district who have purchased Seesaw 3 through 5. There is also a free version of Seesaw that teachers could potentially be using. And then I do know that we have some special ed students where the teachers are using Seesaw because they feel that it's a better fit for their needs. So Seesaw in general, when we're looking as a student, when you have a student K1, they are going to be accessing Seesaw through an iPad, which means they're going to be using Seesaw on an app. So there's an app for Seesaw, and then there's also the web browser, which is what I'm going to do most of my modeling with today. However, regardless of if you're on the app, on the iPad, or on the web version, the structure of Seesaw looks the same. So either way, what I'm covering today will be applicable whether you're K1 on the iPad or 2 through 5 or even beyond on a Chromebook. So the first thing, so again, this is Seesaw, and this is a student view of Seesaw. And you'll notice that along the right-hand side, we have some different categories that our students can click on. And again, please feel free, or if this is your first time joining us, that you can pin my presentation. So if you hover over it and select the push pin, that will make it larger so that you can see. I'll also try to do some zooming for that to help as well. But again, on this right-hand side, on the blue kind of banner, there are 3 main sections that a student can access. They have their journal, and when you click on your journal, really that is just a compilation of activities that they have submitted, okay? We also have our activities tab, which is signified by the light bulb. Here is where they're going to find work that their teacher has assigned to them. And then we also have an inbox, which is where a teacher can send messages to the class, class announcements. Most of the time, teachers use this in conjunction with parents, so the parents and the students will get the announcements. But those are really the 3 main things that students have access to. You will also notice in the top left-hand corner, we have the student's name. So this is a demo account, but if you were working with a student, you would see their name listed. It says that it is a student account, and then it tells you how many classes they are enrolled in. So as a student, I can click on my name up here and see the classes that I am a part of. Now, this year, if you worked with Seesaw in previous years, you've probably noticed that students have a lot of classes, and that is just because of our Skyward rostering this year. But it will be important to talk with the classrooms that you support so that you know what classes the student's supposed to be working out of. And that's one of our troubleshooting tips that I'll talk about in a little bit. But a lot of the times the student's like, well, I can't find that assignment they're talking about. Well, chances are they're in the wrong class or they're submitting to the wrong class. So it's helpful to know whether the classroom teacher is posting everything to one class, like my practice class, or if they are posting to different subject areas. So maybe they want all the math to be in the math one and all the reading to be in the reading one. But that's the layout of the student view. When I go as a student into an activity, so again, I'm going to click on my activities tab and go into a specific activity. And again, all of the activities are listed. There's no great way to organize these activities on the activities page. It's by most recent at the top. The classroom teacher can pin one activity to the top if they would like, but other than that, it's again just chronological. So if I want to go in and as a student complete something, I'm going to click on that green Add a Response button, and it's going to take me to the assignment. As a student, you can always view your instructions that the teacher has. That's a button along the top. And then you also have tools. Again, these tools are going to be the same whether you're on an iPad or a Chromebook. So just briefly going over some of these tools that your students will have. The first one on the left-hand side, this T, is a text tool. So when I click on it, a text box appears, and then they can either use their keyboard, again on a Chromebook, or there will be a keyboard that pops up on their iPad where they can type. And then they are able to move that text wherever they need to do, also adjust and resize. So that's the first one. We have our microphone tool, which if a student were to click on that, they would be able to record their voice. So you'll notice, oh, and this is something good to note. As a first time using the microphone on Seesaw, I got the Seesaw wants to use your microphone, which I do have to say allow. Chances are your teachers have already practiced with your students, so hopefully this is taken care of, but that's another great thing to note. Okay, so I can start recording. It's going to count down for me. You'll notice I do have a red bar along the top, which tells me that I am recording. Students have a maximum of 5 minutes to record. When the student is done, all they have to do is hit that green check in the top right corner. The nice thing about Seesaw is their consistency, right? So a green check mark means I'm done, I'm good, and that's across the board. Now I'm just going to turn this recording off, which is using the red X in the top left corner. But again, the student would hit the done check mark, and then teachers would be able to listen to what they're doing. Then we also have our camera button on the left-hand side. And when I click on the camera button, you'll notice I now have 3 options. This is a new, something relatively new that Seesaw pushed out. As a student, I have the ability to upload a photo or take a photo. Sorry, take a photo is this first one, where it would bring up the camera, again, either on the Chromebook or on the iPad, and then they can take a picture of their work. If your student is on the iPad, there are those 2 cameras, right? So a forward-facing camera and then the back-facing camera, and they can switch between those if needed to whether take a picture of themselves or take a picture of their work. We have the ability to record a video as a student. So again, it would use the camera on the device and then record a video. And then we have our upload button as well, which would upload a photo from whatever device they are on. The 3 dots is another tool that, again, students have access to, whether it's shapes, inserting shapes, backgrounds, or adding a link. Chances are your students will not use any of those tools, with the exception of maybe the shapes. If the teacher says, you know, put a heart on your favorite part, they might then do that. But other than that, they probably won't use the 3 dots. The tools along the bottom are probably the most important tools for your students. You know, some of our younger students would say something like, oh, it's not letting me move an item. So you'll notice when I'm on my finger icon, that allows me to move different parts of my Seesaw. So whether it's my text or my shape, I need to make sure that I'm on my move tool, which again is that finger. I also have a pencil, which would allow me to write, a marker, a highlighter, and then also this magic marker, which writes, you know, a little fancy like that. All of those tools along the bottom, the marker, pencil, highlighter, you can adjust the colors by the color bar on the right-hand side. So that allows me to change, the color of my writing. And then the last one we have is our eraser. And the eraser allows me to do just that, erase. A good tip for your students if you're working with a student and you need them to erase a large area, if you click on the eraser a second time, you can erase the drawing and it gets rid of everything that I've written on there. And you can also adjust the size, so you can make the eraser larger or smaller, but I can erase it, everything goes away. Same tip goes for if you're using the marker tool. If I click on it a second time, again, I can adjust the size of my writing. So those are the tools in Seesaw from the student view. When a student is done with their work, you'll notice in the top right-hand corner, there's a green check. The green check submits the assignment to the teacher. If you are a Seesaw for Schools member, or like paid version of it, you also will see this draft option where the student could save it as a draft and then come back to it. This does not submit it to the teacher, but that is an option that is there. So again, that is a real quick overview of what the student sees on Seesaw, all the tools and everything else. I'm going to pause for questions, but then I do want to show you our troubleshooting tips and then our logins. But if there's any questions on the tools, please let me know. Okay. Please feel free again to ask questions in the chat or also unmute your microphone if you would like. So again, that's the student side. Now, here is, again, that kind of cheat sheet that you have access to that you can look at and go back on. So I talked a little bit about how students K1 are on iPads and obviously 2 and up are on Chromebooks. Well, that looks a little bit different when they're logging in to Seesaw. So when students are on an iPad, it's recommended that the students go through the Clever app. So there's an app on their iPad. They'll click that. And then inside Clever, they'll click on the Seesaw app. That's recommended because it will log them in automatically. You know, it's tied to our paid version of Seesaw. So that's the recommended method for logging in. And then I do have some troubleshooting tips. So if for some reason it's not working, they can't get logged in. First couple steps would be closing all the apps on the iPad, restarting the iPad, and then trying again to go through Clever. We have found that on the iPad, sometimes it takes the student going through Clever like 2 or 3 times before it will actually take and log them in. That's not ideal, but it does work eventually. If for some reason you cannot go through Clever with a student, there are some additional options. This would you'd have to work in tandem with the teacher because the teacher has access to these resources. But there is a class QR code, and I know some of our teachers sent that home with our students ahead of time just in case they got logged out or Clever wasn't working. And that doesn't expire, so that's available to the student. They can go to the Seesaw app and scan it, and it will log them in. And then there's also a text code, which would expire in 1 hour. So if for some reason Clever is not working, these are just some tips that you can try with your students. And of course, make sure that they're using a school-issued device because that does make a difference. As far as our 2 through 5, there's a couple ways students could log in. Again, the recommended way would be to go through Clever, especially if they are using the paid version of Seesaw, which would be going to a Clever bookmark, clicking on Seesaw, and then logging in. And then in reverse, some people bookmark Seesaw, and that could be another method for them getting into Clever. And I did include some helpful hints if they are on a Chromebook and Seesaw is not working, it's not letting them log into Seesaw. Some just troubleshooting tips that you could have the student try, like clearing their cache and history, restarting their Chromebook, and then also maybe removing bookmarks and trying again. At the bottom of this document, there is also our resources. We have a really great video from the student view. So again, I showed you the student view a little bit today, but if you want a refresher, you could always watch this training again or go to our student view video, which is linked at the bottom. And then there's also a ton of resources for teachers and co-teachers. So some of you might have co-teacher access, and maybe the classrooms that you work with are asking you to create content in Seesaw or create activities. There are some great videos walking you through that, as well as you can always reach out to your buildings technology coach. The second page on this document, again, that you all have access to, is just ask if your student says they're having trouble turning in an assignment. And there's two main things that might happen if they can't turn in an assignment. The first thing is maybe they're not in that right class, right? So I showed you how on the student side you can switch between classes. So that would be the first thing to check. Are they in the right class? Because if they're not seeing the assignments their teachers is talking about, chances are that's the first issue. And then they can just toggle between the right class and then again make sure they're on that activities tab. The second issue that we see a lot with students is they don't know how to submit an assignment, or maybe they're having issues and they're saying, well, you know, the parent's like, well, we're doing the assignments, why is the teacher not getting them? So some steps there would be to make sure, again, that they're in the correct class, that they're going to that activities tab, and then clicking the green add a response button. And it walks you through those steps right there. And again, you have access to this. It's a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So if eventually we get back into the buildings, feel free to print these and you can have a hard copy of it accessible to look at moving forward as well. Okay, so I will keep the remaining time for any questions that we have about Seesaw. Again, we talked about how students log in. So remember K1, they're on an iPad through the Clever app. 2 through 5, they're on a Chromebook, so they're going through the web. We talked about the student view, so the tools, navigation, kind of the different things they see, and then some troubleshooting strategies. So please feel free to unmute your microphone or ask in the chat if you have any questions. One question that I did see come through, and Sarah answered it in the chat, but since we have a little bit of time, I'm more than happy to show you that as well, is if the teacher does not create an activity for the student to complete, there is still a way where students can submit work. So if I go back to my student view, you'll notice I showed you how to submit an activity, but the student does have this green add button on their account as well. And this would be if the student wanted to submit something, again, that the teacher didn't specifically assign, or maybe during their Google Meet or during class time, they said, okay, take a picture of your writing and I want you to post it on Seesaw. So the other option is, again, for them to click this green plus with the add button. And when they do that, the student is given some options. If they wanted to just take a picture of their work, we have this photo option where, again, it would bring up the camera and they would be able to take a picture. They would have to hit that green check saying they liked the picture and submit it that way. There is a video option. So if a teacher says, record a video of you reading to someone or reading to yourself and submit that, they could do that as well. And then there's also another one that most students would use is maybe the drawing tool, where they can go in and they have all the same tools available to themselves, just not with any instructions attached to it. So those are some other options for submitting student work if an assignment is not specifically given to students. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording, but I will stay on. until everyone's questions are answered. And thanks for being here today.